Hello and happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of Raquel's Modern Life. This is your host, Raquel Williams, and today's episode was supposed to be a travel log, but unfortunately, I am sick with whatever is going around New York right now, and I just decided that instead of trying to cut through all my brain fog and remember what I did on my trips and try to speak with any sort of eloquence, I'm going to be doing a sick day episode. So, if you're also sick right now, we're in this together. If you're not, fuck you and your good immune system. And, or also, if you're not, be careful. It's on the way. Let's see. Today has just been kind of a roller coaster of a day. First of all, I've woken up at 5 a.m. every day this week for work. And today I didn't have work. And I also woke up right at 5 a.m. Like exactly at 5 a.m. Just sprang to life. I don't know what the symptoms are. I don't know if I have COVID. I don't know if I have something else. But it's that typical sinus stuff. And then it feels like my head has been slammed with a sledgehammer. But my tips for when you're sick is to just eat a lot of food and drink a lot of water. And those were two things I just didn't have the energy to do today. And I had such bad dizziness and brain fog that when I went to take some ibuprofen, I spilled the entire bottle on the floor. So my day kind of started out with me scream crying on the floor. Then progressed to me watching all 3 Bridget Jones movies. And then my boyfriend taught me how to cross stitch. I'm working on a LaCroix cross stitch and an embroidery hoop. And because I have such a bad brain fog, I keep miscounting and fucking it up. But you know what? It's gonna turn out gorgeous. It's gonna be so good. Yeah. Shit, man. So I wanted to implement a couple new segments into the show. One of them is the Girl Code segment. So there was this show on MTV back in I think it aired from around 2011 to 2015 called Girl Code, and it was the spinoff of a show called Guy Code. Actually, I'm not sure which one came first, but I think Guy Code came first because of sexism, but anyway. But yeah, Pete Davidson was on Guy Code, Aquafina was on Girl Code. Stephanie Sue from Everywhere Everything All at Once was on Girl Code. Yeah, good show. Anyway, they would have topics every episode, and all of these comedians would discuss their takes on them, essentially. And then they would kind of animate them or have little sketches. So I wrote down every topic of Girl Code, every episode. It was usually 3 topics. And numbered them, and I'm gonna do a random number and then tell you my takes on those 3 topics. So that's one segment I want to introduce. The other one is questions and answers. Basically, you can comment on the podcast, you can DM me on Instagram, however you want to get a hold of me, and you can ask me questions that you would like me to feature on the pod. And I won't say your name unless you really want me to, but it will be anonymous for the most part. And yeah, and I can give advice or just my opinion. I wouldn't necessarily take my advice, but I will offer it. Another thing I want to start doing is if you have a company that you want me to shout out, let me know. Just DM me and we'll figure something out. And then maybe if you have your own podcast, I want to start doing cross collaborations. So that is my vision. This is my Pinterest board 2025. For the past maybe 5 years. And when people are oh, what's your New Year's resolution? I'm it's to go to Jupiter and get more stupider. And I say that to protect my real resolutions because, gotta move in silence. But ultimately this year, I actually am going to be quite honest with you. My New Year's resolution is to be happy. I've kind of realized that every year it's oh, I want to do this and I want to achieve that and I want to work on this aspect. And I'm it kind of doesn't really mean shit if you're not worried about what's making me happy, what's making me unhappy. Let me lean into more of what's making me happy and do less of what's making me unhappy. Ultimately that's kind of just the point of life. And I'm not talking about happiness as in everything's perfect. I'm talking about how often do I bounce back when things go wrong, or how often do I create good situations in my life more intentionally. So yeah, I mean, God, it's a tall order. When people are like, "Oh, I just want you to be happy," and you're like, "God, can't you like have another expectation of me? Like that one's the most pressure of all." But I think at the end of the day, like that's really the one that changes everything. Like once you can figure out how to be happy, you can figure out how to like do all that other shit you want to do, you know? So today's kind of a weird day. Obviously, you'll be listening to this on Tuesday, but I'm recording it on Saturday. And if you're chronically online or even minorly on TikTok, you know that the ban is supposed to take effect tomorrow. So by the time you listen to this, it will have presumably, presumably, right? I mean, I have no reason to think that it won't, but there's a lot of like mixed information about this. So anyway, I I don't know. I have to download all my videos and then, you know, there's a couple of them that I might throw up on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, I now have a YouTube channel for this podcast. It's Raquel's Modern Life username. Oh, that's my radiator. Can you hear it? It goes off at like 5 a.m. Which is great because that's the time I'm supposed to wake up for work. So it's a great little alarm clock. It's clinky as shit, but that is the experience of living in an old ass New York apartment. But yeah, so my YouTube channel, I uploaded my first episode. Probably by the time this comes out, the second one will be up there too. And then when I publish this episode on Spotify, I will also put it on YouTube. So yeah, by the time you hear this, it should be up to date. And then maybe contain some of my TikToks if I decide to do that. So a few people have asked me where they can watch my episode of America's Next Top Model. And currently it's for sale on Amazon for like $3 for the episode, $13 for the season, which don't buy that. It's not worth it. But they do have some bootleg videos up on Dailymotion. So yeah, definitely would recommend checking that out. If you just Google ANTM Cycle 22, and then it's like the first one that pops up, Dailymotion S22E01. Definitely a riveting watching experience. So I'd like to start this girl code segment today. Let me pull out my notes with all the different topics. All right, now we're gonna get a number randomizer. All right, so there are 63 different things on this list, or like 63 different groups of topics, and I rolled number 59, which is watching TV, hugging, and being insecure. So okay, watching TV is a little bit interesting because it can kind of go a couple different ways. I think the way we all have so much screen time these days with our phones, I think a little bit of that bleeds into TV watching, right? Like binging episodes over and over again just kind of like has the same effect as scrolling on your phone for hours without like taking a break. That being said, I do feel like TV is probably my favorite medium. You know, the storytelling that can be done in a TV format compared to a film format is so much more in depth, and like the character arcs, you just get this complete sense of a character from like their, you know, problematic aspects to their like redemptive aspects. I feel like, yeah, you can get that in a movie too, but I think there's just something about the TV medium that is so reflective of life. Yeah, some of my favorite TV shows, oh my god. I could be here all day. In no particular order: Futurama, Mad Men, Desperate Housewives, South Park, Orange is the New Black, Firefly, Dollhouse, Umbrella Academy, Russian Doll. Atypical was really good. That was one of those shows where when it was done, I was like, damn, I wish there were other shows that evoked this feeling. And I mean, I feel that way about a lot of the shows I mentioned. I think Desperate Housewives might be my all-time favorite show in the sense that I don't really get the feeling I get from that show from anything else. Orange is the New Black, though, is like pretty close. Oh, Shameless is a great show. like Shameless, I think is a really big example of that one where like, every character has their hateable moments, and maybe in a movie like you would hate that character because you would only see that part of them. And so with 10 plus season show, you get the full arc, you get the full range, you really empathize. And I think that that's like something we don't even get in real life. You know what I mean? Like in real life, you don't get to know people that well. You see one facet of people, and shows kind of in a way teach us empathy. I don't know. I love TV. I could go on. I do watch way too much of it though. Like this is why I learned how to what the fuck is this called? This is why I learned how to cross stitch, is because like I want to be actually creating something while I'm consuming something, because, it doesn't exactly make me happier to just keep consuming constantly, and that, is my resolution. So anyway, that's how I feel about TV. All right, next topic is hugging. Hugging. I feel like this has been coming up a lot for me lately. People like to say either like I'm a hugger or I'm not a hugger. It's like the new introvert extrovert, whether we identify as a hugger or not. It's interesting because when I know someone and I see them or I'm leaving, I will hug them generally, most of the time. So I think I would say I am a hugger, like in practice. But in like the way I identified, no, I'm actually not. That was a learned behavior, because when I was a little kid, I really didn't understand the point of like hugging people hello and goodbye. I mean, I would like hug my parents, and that was, and like my grandparents and stuff, but like it just wasn't natural to me to always be like, oh hi, let me give you a hug. Like my family had to be like, okay, say bye, and I'd be like bye, and people would be like ha ha ha. And like especially hugging kids my own age, like there's certain kids that are really affectionate and they're like really cute and love to hug, and I would just be kind of like awkwardly standing there like, oh okay, I guess that's what we're doing. It didn't occur to me. I didn't like hate it. I just was like, oh okay, whatever. So then when I was about 15, 16, I was at that age where people were like, oh, like hugging when they see each other, and I was like trying to like pick up on social cues, and I was like, this is what I should be doing. And then from that point on, I kind of would like initiate it, because I was like, I got in too many situations where it's like, oh, are we hugging? Are we not hugging? You do that awkward arm dance. And so I just decided, okay, I'm just going to start like initiating it, and that way there's no confusion. But then that's run into its own awkward situations where people are 100% not expecting me to hug them. And then I do, and they're kind of like, okay. And then I'm like, why are we having this interaction that neither of us wants? Like, this is so bad, like it's obviously making you uncomfortable, and it's not something that I particularly want or need. So I'm like reevaluating my relationship with hugging. And I think and like there was like someone on my kickball team who was like, oh, I'm not a hugger, and then the next time I saw them I hugged them, and then I immediately afterwards was like, I'm so sorry, I should have asked first. And they said I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't okay with it, but I do appreciate being asked first. And I was like, oh shit, like that's something that I wouldn't think of. And I know it's something that some people are like, oh, like big deal, who cares? And I'm like, you don't know someone's life. And honestly, they don't even have to have a reason for not wanting to hug. It's just not necessary if someone doesn't want to. And especially with young kids, like being like, oh, you need to hug a family member, you need to do this and that. I just don't personally think it's necessary. I mean, I understand the need to like socialize your child, but like, I don't know. I think it's also good to teach your kid to have boundaries around what they do or don't want. So anyway, not saying that was my experience at all. My parents, I do remember being a kid and my mom being like, oh, Raquel just doesn't like to hug people, especially men. And I was like, oh, what are you talking? I was like so little, but I was like, what do you mean? And then after that, I like made it a point to like not be weird about it, because I was like, what? And like she wasn't saying it judgmentally, but when you're a kid, you just take everything so personally. So I was like I'm being perceived right now. What do you mean? So yeah, I think it's a good thing that we're kind of talking about this more, because it's like, yeah, it is kind of, I don't know. And then I know in other countries too, people are like very hug, kisses on the cheek. It's like a whole different level of it. So yeah, I definitely think that that's an important thing to consider too, on like whether or not hugging is, I'm trying to think of the word. Necessary, appropriate, expected, like normal. I don't know. It's interesting. Now I want to like now I want to look up the Wikipedia page for hugging because this is what I do. Wikipedia is my favorite website, and if there's ever a concept where I'm like, I wonder what people have to say about this, I go to Wikipedia and I donate like $2 to them every month, which isn't a lot, but it's every month and you should too. It's the Wikimedia Foundation. I know you've seen the pop-ups. All right, moving on to the third topic. Being insecure. Ooh, I have much to say about this one. Okay. I would argue that everyone is insecure about something. Obviously, there are some people who are insecure about almost everything, and there are others who have very few insecurities. But I think even if like you're perfect, you might be insecure about like maintaining that perfection. If I heard an interview with Simone Biles, and she was talking about how like they're like, what was it like winning your first gold medal at 19? She's like, really scary, because then it was like, oh my god, the rest of my life I'm gonna have to be living up to this thing I achieved when I was 19. What if I can't do it again? Or what if I never do anything else? That's an insecurity. So like, no matter who you are or what you've done, I think it would kind of be impossible to not feel insecure about something, even if your only competitor is your former self. That being said, like obviously the way you handle your insecurities matters, I think, a lot more than the insecurities themselves. And I think some people can really internalize things and like lash out at others, or like use their insecurities as a reason to belittle others, or belittle themselves, like diminish themselves because they're insecure about like some aspect that they want to downplay. But I never really heard the term insecure that much used in conversation until I was in like junior high. And I remember I would come home and I'd be like, oh mom, like these girls were mean to me or whatever, they said this about me or they acted this way. And she's like, oh, it's just because they're insecure and you're so confident and they're insecure and that's why they treat you like that. And I was just kind of like, okay, I guess, kind of made sense, kind of didn't really seem like the case. But the main thing that I was thinking that I didn't really know how to say is like, I'm insecure. Like, they and me are not the same, and I'm the one that's insecure. Like, and at that age when you're 12, 13, and I mean, I've talked about this on the first episode, but like, you're so concerned with like, not just like what other people think about you, but like what you think about you, and you're just so insecure, not just the established aspects of yourself, but like in the uncertainty of being a person. And that doesn't go away after junior high, like it's for some people it does, for others it's a lifelong battle. And so I always was a little bit puzzled by that. Now that I'm an adult, I completely understand what she means, but at the time I was like, no, it's because I'm insecure and they can pick up on that like weakness and they're kind of preying on it, which is also true. And that's the thing I realize now as an adult is like, if people are going out of their way to belittle you or demean you or be rude to you, it's usually not because they think that you're the biggest loser on earth. Like, if they really did think that, they would leave you alone out of pity. You know what I mean? But some aspect about you is like challenging to them. Like the way I saw it when my mom was saying, oh, they're insecure, I was like, oh, you think they're jealous of me? Like, that's laughable. And I don't think you need to necessarily be jealous of someone for that person to make you insecure. Maybe they remind you too much of yourself, or like someone you could be if you let the guard down or let the mask drop a little bit, or like, maybe they seem to be a little bit more comfortable in their skin than you are, and that triggers your insecurity or like whatever. But I do think that, if someone is going out of their way to be like rude to you, even as an adult, it happens all the time in like workplace settings or friend groups or wherever. If someone's like saying some real out of pocket stuff to you, it's not because they think you're pathetic. Like, it's because they're threatened by you in some aspects. Because like, think of and I know everyone's different, but like me as a person, if I really didn't like how am I trying to say this? If I really thought I was better than someone, why would I ever try to make them feel even lower. Like if I already thought I was above someone, so to say, I mean, I don't think I'm above anyone, but like if I already felt superior to someone in some aspect, why would I need to make them any lower? You only need to bring people down when you don't feel superior. And that's something I think that like most people aren't even themselves aware of when they're doing it. But yeah, I think insecurity is seen as this like really, really negative thing when it's just like an aspect of life. And I think the more comfortable, like paradoxically, I think the more comfortable we get with the fact that we are insecure, the less insecure we'll be, because it's like we're insecure about being insecure. It's like snake eating its own tail. It's a self-generating machine. So the more that we can just admit like, hey, I'm really insecure about this, like I think, and admit it to yourself, don't admit it to the person that's making you insecure. Jesus Christ, like get a therapist. That okay. Nothing pisses me off more actually than when someone's like, oh, like I thought I was the best, but you're actually kind of good too, and it's making me a little bit insecure. And it's like, oh, okay. It makes you almost want to be a bitch to them. Like it makes you want to be like, oh, you thought we were in the same league, but like you know what I mean? It's like, oh, really? Me being good challenges you that much? Like, why? Why? Because someone like me is good? I don't know. It feels very personal when someone is threatened by you. So like, talk about it with your therapist. Do not talk about it with the person, please. I mean, if it's someone you're very close to, then maybe a conversation needs to happen. But if it's obviously affecting your relationship with them and they're like, what's going on, you can say, hey, I'm insecure, but like you have to take full responsibility for it. You can't just be like, hey, can you like dim yourself down a little bit so I can shine, please? Because ultimately, like, that won't make you feel better. It won't make you less insecure, I promise you. The only thing that can make you less insecure is just admitting like, hey, nobody's perfect. I'm just gonna like keep doing my thing the best way I know how to do it, and also get inspired by other people. Like I feel jealousy all the time, but it's never in this like negative, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but like anytime it has been in this negative way, I'm like, okay, what is it about this person that I'm like triggered by? And usually it's like, okay, I want what they have and I'm wondering like why they have it and I don't. Okay, well then follow that curiosity. Be like, well, maybe they have it because of these traits about them, and how can I develop those traits? Or do I even want to develop those traits? And if not, okay, well now I know that I don't really want that thing that they have in insecurity handled. You know what I mean? So there's like a lot of different ways that you can handle it, besides like confronting or being rude to the person that is making you insecure, or rude to yourself. Like be nice to yourself. I know it's easier said than done, and I'm certainly not the poster child for it, but like be nice to yourself, everyone. 2025, our resolution is to be happy and to be nice to ourselves. Yeah, watch me listen to this back like 2 days from now and be like I'm just having a fever induced ramble, but I don't know, in my mind right now it sounded pretty good. All right, so now we're moving into the questions and answers portion. Maybe I'll come up with like a cute little name for this. Like, so the girl code section is going to be called Rock Talks, and the question and answers segment is going to be called Modern Problems, Modern Solutions. This is subject to change. Those are working titles. Anyway, so the question I just got was, what is my advice to someone who is dealing with a person who might be insecure in the workplace or in another environment that you have to be in, like school, who is trying to belittle you, diminish you? See, the problem is I don't think I have always handled it well myself in the past. Usually I would either kind of ignore it if it wasn't that egregious, and then totally freak out once it crossed the line. And I wouldn't recommend that. And I think now that I have a little more perspective, I handle it differently. So like when someone is belittling me, and you know, the thing is, in these specific incidences, they're usually saying things that are not true, or they're exaggerating them, or kind of just being overly critical of you and constant. When you're in the workplace, the thing that's going to save you the most emotional, mental, and like physical energy is to just maintain your peace. Like, do not match energies. And that's not just like brushing it off or ignoring it. It's maintaining your professional energy and just saying like, well, actually, I did do this thing, or like I did, or just being like, okay, like if someone's like, oh my god, like berating you and they expect you to like argue with them, you can just be like, oh, okay, and then like not do what they say. Or do it if you were already going to, but it's just kind of like just acting like they're this annoying little fly on your shoulder that you're not really bothered by, I think will go a long way to help you out. And I think eventually they'll just realize like you're not the one who they can get the fight they're looking for out of, because that's a big thing too. I think when people are chronically pushing your buttons, they are subconsciously looking for a fight. And yeah, sometimes when you give them one, they like chill out for a bit, but it's kind of like more satisfying not to. And I think also if you're letting it get to you and it's actually making you feel worse about yourself, consider the facts, right? Anytime we're caught up in our emotions, it's good to consider the facts. Anytime we're caught up in the facts, it's good to turn to our emotions. Like, you have to have a balance in life. And so if you are good at your job, if you're doing everything right, if the job is getting done and someone's like micromanaging you or someone's just like nitpicking you, be like, is what they are saying founded or not? And this can be hard if you're like a particularly self-critical person, but like if what they're saying is founded, then you have another thing to decide. Do you care? Like, if someone's like, oh my god, you're bad at this, you're bad at that. Okay. Is it something you want to work on? Like, if they weren't saying this, would it be something that you would want to improve upon? If so, then act as if they were not saying these things and improve upon them the way that you want to. If it's something that you're only wanting to improve upon because that person is berating you, don't do it. Throw it out. Throw it out the window. Doesn't matter. Like, why would you take advice from a person you're not trying to emulate? There is so much unsolicited advice in this world. I'm guilty of giving unsolicited advice as well, but like, no one has to listen to anybody. Like, you are your own autonomous person, and that's something that's really hard for a lot of us. I'm the same way, but like, it took me years to realize that other people's opinions were not more valuable than my own. And that is something that, like, listen, at the end of the day, like, if everyone is saying the same thing and is mad at you, like, maybe they're all bullies. Maybe there's some merit to what they're saying, and they're just going about it in the wrong way. And that is up to you to decide. And we also need to stop explaining ourselves so much and stop defending ourselves so much. And sometimes we need to listen to the criticism and just say, okay, and then decide if we're going to internalize it and work on those things and use it as constructive criticism, or if we're just going to like let it flow like water off a duck's back. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're ultimately the only person in charge of you. You're an adult, presumably, if you're listening to this. So yeah, like my advice is to just be confident in your own opinions and abilities, and then, and you can also shut people down. Like, I love turning things back around on people when they're like, oh, did you do this and that? And it's like, well, no, did you? Like, I don't know. I just love, I think sometimes people don't realize how they're being until you model it back to them. However, you can't be emotional about it. That's the biggest thing that will like keep you in your autonomous power, is like by not letting your emotions get the better of you in these places like work. You got to kind of have a like trickster energy to you of like nothing is that serious, but it's all a little bit of a game. So when people are trying to play stupid games, you just got to be like, okay, let's play then. You have to just kind of like let them know that you're not worried about them. In a social situation, if someone insults you, you can pretend that you think it's a compliment. This is so fun because either it'll humble them, they'll kind of be like, oh yeah, like I am being an asshole, or it'll just piss them off. But either way, you're like deflecting it back onto them. So like if someone says, for example, let's just use what I talked about in my last video. If someone was like, you look like a shark, I could be like, oh, thank you. Sharks are my favorite animal. And then they would be forced back into the position of having to like admit that it wasn't a compliment or to pretend like it was. It's like you're kind of forcing their hand to tell on themselves. Yeah. I hope that that answered the question. I'm not sure if it did, but no one's opinion matters but your own. And that sounds crazy. And you're like, well, I need this job to survive. Okay, do what you need to do to keep the job and don't listen to anyone else. Especially people who are not your manager. I'm sorry. Like, I get it that we're all helping each other out. We're a team. But, like, oh my God, anyone who's trying to boss you around who isn't your manager, they can shut the fuck up. Like, seriously. Okay, next question. What movies are the best to watch when you're sick? Okay, I have a great opinion about this. I love watching I don't always love watching them, but I love watching horror movies when I'm sick because you're in a completely different physical state when you're sick, and horror movies also put you into a different physical state. So when I'm sick, like my senses are very dulled. I like feel like I'm in a fog, you know? Everything hurts. Like you're very much in your body, but you're very much like out of it at the same time. And so I feel like watching horror movies, like you're a little bit removed from the scariness of it all because you're kind of just like in your little fog. But also it gets your heart rate up, it gets your adrenaline going. It kind of like it makes you feel alive a little bit when you're feeling kind of dead. Yeah, last year I was sick with the flu for pretty much an entire month because it was the flu and then it turned into a sinus infection and then it kept going undiagnosed. It was this whole thing. But anyway, during that time I watched Get Out. Never had seen it before. I watched Us. I watched X and Pearl. I still haven't seen Maxine yet, but I watched all of those. I can't remember what else I watched, but like I just kind of did a little horror marathon and it was so fun. It completely took my mind off the fact that I felt horrible, and it was really enjoyable. And like it wasn't just like any horror movie, although that probably would have been great, but it was like, you know, actual like really good works of cinema. So I just not always in the mood for horror, but when you're sick it kind of feels like your own personal horror show, so why not commemorate the occasion? Okay, I think that wraps up modern questions, modern answers for this week. Next week, I'll hopefully be well enough to tell you all about my trip to Tromsø, Norway during Christmas. And in the meantime, I will be cross-stitching a LaCroix. I hope you're all doing great, and I will see you next Tuesday. Bye.